Da 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 da. Da 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 da. There used to be a granite tower alone on the sea. You became the light on the dark side of me. Love remains a drug that's high, not the pill. Did you know when it snowed, my eyes become large and the light that you shine can't be seen? Baby, I compare you to a kiss from a rose on a grave. Ooh, the more I get of you, the stranger it feels, yeah. Now that your rose is in bloom, a light hits the gloom on the grave. Da 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 da. There is so much a man can tell you, so much he can say. You remain my power, my pleasure, my pain. Baby, to me you're like a grown addiction that I can't deny. Won't you tell me, is that healthy, baby? Did you know when it snowed, my eyes become large and the light that you shine can't be seen? Baby, I compare you to a kiss from a rose on a grave. Ooh, the more I get of you, the stranger it feels, yeah. Now that your rose is in bloom, a light hits the gloom on the grave. Da 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 da. Da 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 da. Been kissed by a rose on a grave. I've been kissed by a rose on the grave. And if I should fall, will it all go away? I've been kissed by a rose. Baby, I compare you to a kiss from a rose on a grave. Ooh, the more I get of you, the stranger it feels, yeah. Now that your rose, a light hits the gloom on the grave. Yes, I compare you to a kiss from a rose on a grave. Ooh, the more I get of you, the stranger it feels, yeah. Now that your rose is in bloom, a light hits the gloom on the grave. Da 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 da. Da 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 da. Now that your rose is in bloom, a light hits the gloom on the grave. Hey Mason, good to see you, brother.
Yeah, man. Let me resituate.
So
here.
are we recording now?
Yep.
Yeah.
We're still
Okay.
going, yeah.
So first of all, right, I was the one that seeked Mason out because I was such a fan and I wanted to be on his show. And he's just like, oh, Seal, That guy? No. No, but okay, that's kind of that. He didn't say that. Obviously, that wasn't his. Well, not obviously, but that wasn't his response. But the true bit is that I did actually seek you out, didn't I? Because we have a mutual friend, Brian, who was being really selfish and keeping Mason all to himself. When I already told Brian that I was a fan of Mason's because I've been watching his podcast for forever, right? I'm a fan of the pedals. I'm a fan of his podcast, and that you were doing that Thursday podcast with Brian, and he was there. So Brian had actually traveled up from Texas or wherever it is he lives, and he was in the Bay Area with Mason, and I was on FaceTime with Brian, and I said, "Put Mason on the phone." And he was kind of like, I could see that he just like, he didn't really want to share Mason. But I was like, put him on. Yeah, I was like pretty kind of, determined. I said, put him on the phone. And so he put he put Brian on, Mason on FaceTime, and we've been quick buddies ever since.
Wow.
So I actually wanted to be on his show. It's not like he asked, he came looking for me. He couldn't care less.
Well, I think as you'll find as we get deeper into the interview that couldn't be further from the truth. And I have to say it's been a real honor getting to know you and to get to be able to play Kiss from a Rose with you. And I'm just absolutely dumbfounded that you'd even agree to be in a room with me and be interviewed.
Oh, come on, dude. It's great. I'm a fan.
Well, I'd love to start, since we've already begun playing Kiss from a Rose. I'd love to hear from you about sort of how the song developed, the session, the gear to the degree that you know it, and use that as our jumping off point today for the interview.
How did it begin? Well, it began about 3 or 4 years before I actually recorded my first album, even though Kiss from a Rose ended up on the second album. I'd written it maybe about 2 to 3 years before the release of the first album, before I even had a record deal. And the reason I wrote it was because I just got my hands on a Tascam 244, which for those of you who don't know is an old 4-track. And we used to use cassette tapes with, normal cassette tapes with an A and a B side. And with the 4-track Porter Studios, they were called in England, what you could do is you could split the tape, you could multi-track a cassette tape up until about 16 tracks before it would start degrading. Actually, probably about 8, but those cheapos among us, we pushed it to 16. And so I couldn't figure out how to work this thing, but I knew, obviously I bought it for its multi-tracking capabilities. And so I couldn't play an instrument at the time. Some could argue I still can't, but that's up for debate. And so basically trying to figure out how to work this thing, I started multi-tracking, and I tried to imagine what an orchestra would do. Because obviously that would be the most obvious thing, in my mind, to try and multi-track. So that would explain why Kiss from a Rose has those quite orchestral parts, and it's quite different from anything else I've written. So da 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 da. That would be like a string line or
cello,
or cello, and then. I've been kissed by a rose. Well, that would be kind of like, I guess, something that a flute would play. And, and so it was me trying to impersonate an orchestra. I couldn't tell you what the heck I was singing. Well, I kind of could tell you what I was singing about at the time, but it was me trying to impersonate an orchestra. And I made my first 4-track demo. Which was Kiss from a Rose. And I didn't really think of it as, a seminal song or something that I would be known for or most known for in the future, because it really kind of started off as a semi-experiment. And I think there's a huge lesson in that, because when you're making music in a very free-flowing state where you're not trying to write a hit or trying to write a great song, or trying to do any of those things. You somehow kind of you do without doing, and you have this almost like subconscious approach to writing. And so yeah, that's how it started. And then a friend of mine had heard it, and he obviously thought more of it than I did. And when I eventually ended up signing a record deal with ZTT Records and Trevor Horn, who, my producer, he asked me about this song. Like my friend who's sadly no longer with us, Paul, he told Trevor about this song, that's this Rose song that Seal had written, and Trevor asked me about it when after I signed. And I said, "Oh, no, it's no good. Paul doesn't really know what he's talking about." And so I didn't play it to him, and that's why it never really ended up on the first album. So after the success of the first album, we came around to making the second album. Paul kept telling him, Seal's got this song, you should get him to play it to you, and I wouldn't. And then finally, Trevor kind of badgered me enough, and he said, like, "What is this song that Paul keeps talking about?" And I was in Studio 4, I remember. Tim, was it? Are you there? Tim, my brother and engineer of 35 years now, 34 years. He engineered this. Is Tim there? He's probably disappeared.
Tim.
But I think we were in Studio 4. Studio 4 was, Studio 4 at Psalm West Studios. And that was, in my mind, that was the kind of, and in the minds of many people, actually, that was the best, most kind of revered studio in England at the time. It was in West London. And it had 4 studios, 4 rooms, 1, 2, 3, and 4. And Trevor's, his place was Studio 4. That was, that was his room that he occupied 90% of the time. And we were in the studio when he was in Studio 4 when he was asking me about Kiss from a Rose again. And finally I got frustrated and I went, okay, it goes like this. Da 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 da. And I got the string lines go, "I've been kissed by a rose, baby." And then he's, you can always tell when Trevor gets excited about something because he used to wear these thick glasses at the time, right? Like, because he has not the greatest eyesight. And he would kind of look. He'd be behind the mixing desk. In those days when we used to actually have consoles, he would be behind the desk in between the NS10s, and he'd be like sticking one together, as we say, be rolling one. And whenever he heard something that he knew was a hit, his eyes would get big, and he went, and then in his kind of like in only the way that he can say it, he went, "See, why don't you just go in the control booth and sing those parts for me?" And so I went in the control room, in the vocal booth, sorry. "Why don't you go in the vocal booth and sing those parts?" I went in the vocal booth and spent about, I don't know, anywhere between half an hour to an hour singing all of the parts that I'd sang on the original. Funnily enough, he found that demo. I should have brought it in. He found that demo the other day and sent it to me. I've got it somewhere. Anyway, that's a longer conversation. So I sang those parts. I spent about 35 minutes to an hour singing all of those parts. And then I went away. I came back about 4 days later. And he had this whole backing track that he'd put together with, he had he'd got, I think it was Betsy Cook, I'm not sure, to do the string arrangement. He'd had this whole string arrangement and that was Kiss from a Rose. And so I sang the parts properly and that was it. That's how it came about.
Wow. How many tracks do you think those like harmonized vocals were?
If Tim is here, is Tim in the control room? Because I don't want to give you false information and he would be, Tim, how many vocal tracks?
Looks like 16.
16?
16.
Oh, 16 vocal tracks. But they were all each harmony was at least 8 times, right? So 16 vocal tracks. But each harmony, aside from the lead vocal, obviously, which is not a harmony, but each harmony that you hear was multi-tracked 8 times, wow. a minimum of 8 times.
Wow.
But that's how we used to do it back then. We wouldn't put it in the machine now, that the doubler. And we wouldn't use auto tune or anything like that. We'd sing it until he'd make me sing it until I got it right. I would sing it over and over and over again. Until I got one harmony that was in tune, right? And then he'd say, right, track to that. And then I would have to do that another 7 times. Then we go into the next harmony, and that's how we would do it.
Do you remember what vocal mic you used for that?
67, was it? Probably a 67. Mind you, he used to have this B&K mic that they used for strings, ugly looking thing, right? And like really pointy. And I couldn't stand singing into it. So but it sounded great to his ears. So what he would do a lot of the time, he'd put a 67 up and have it off. But he'd have the B&K beside it just so that he could get the vocals. So I'm not really sure whether it was the B&K or the 67, but my guess is that it was a 67.
Do you have any sense of any like vocal processing that would have been used as far as compressors or anything like that?
Compressors, the Tube Tech. It would have been a Tube Tech.
Yeah.
The blue Tube Tech. What is that 1LB or what's it called, Tim?
Yeah. Yep.
The Tube Tech 1LB, it probably was that. And what desk were we singing through? The euphonics. Euphonics. Yeah.
And as far as like other musicians on that song, was it just the string section and then the kind of the track that Trevor built, or were there other drum or bass or that were on that?
Yeah, there were. I can't read. Honestly, my memory is terrible. Which is great. What that you're here. Who was actually on it, Tim? If you say, we cut the backing track at Peter Gabriel's place in Real World.
Okay.
And Phil Spalding played on an English bass player. He played the original bass line on it. Harvey Mason on drums.
So you flew him out then from
and then we used this this American musician with a big knife, and he replaced Phil Spalding's parts.
Okay.
Yeah, and we couldn't erase him after that, for fear of being chopped to pieces by that knife.
Wow. Well, I mean, I know you've told a lot about this in how it sort of catapulted you into fame, because of the connection with the Batman movie and all that stuff. And I won't get you to go into that because I know that there are a lot of other interviews where you tell that story. But what I'm really interested in as far as the Kiss from a Rose is, you won a Grammy for that song.
Yes.
And I actually have a little photo here of you on the evening where you're with
Annie Lennox.
Annie Lennox, your countrywoman. She's from the UK, right? She's not Irish or anything.
She's Scottish.
She's Scottish, okay. Yeah. And you guys both cleaned up, I think, at that particular Grammys. Can you tell me, like, did you have a sense that it was a likely possibility that you would win that, or like what was kind of your mentality going into the evening, if you remember?
Well, I knew we had a good chance because it was number one, and it didn't really sound like anything else.
Yeah,
it didn't sound like anything before or after, to be quite honest. And so I knew we had a chance, but I guess, winning a Grammy, let alone 3, and I think Trevor won Producer of the Year too, so it's 4 in total. That was beyond my wildest dreams. I didn't. If I told you I knew or I suspected we were going to be that successful with it, I'd be lying. But again, you touched upon how the song came to prominence, and it was one of those songs where, and I do tell this story to people when I'm mentoring young artists, because it is relevant in that you have to do music, first of all, for yourself, and you have to do it for the love of music. It has to, you do it because you're compelled to do it, not necessarily because you are trying to do it for a specific purpose, to become successful or to have a hit. I'm not saying that that's not possible. I'm just saying that there's a certain element of authenticity that comes into play when you are compelled to do music because it's just something that has to come through you rather than you are doing it in a Machiavellian sense. I I A Kiss from a Rose was the fourth single from the second album to be released, and I remember it went into the charts at number 65, dropped to number 80 the next week, and that was the last of it.
What were the other singles, like Bring It On or
Newborn Friend, Prayer for the Dying, and possibly Bring It On, possibly, right? And Kiss from Roses was the last one, and it did nothing.
Yeah.
Like it did nothing. It was it came and went. In fact, it didn't even come, to be honest. It just went. And I was, back in the studio, starting the third album, Human Beings, which we may touch upon later. And Joel Schumacher called me up and he said, "Look, Seal, I'm a big fan. I'm making this movie called Batman Forever, and I need a song for the love scene between Kidman and Kilmer. Do you have anything?" And I said, "Well, no, I don't. I've finished promotion of my second album. It's I'm back in the studio." And Bob Cavallo, God bless him, he was on the call at the moment, and he told me to shut up, and he said, "Joel, I'm going to send you something." And he sent Joel a copy of my second album, and he put an asterisk next to Kiss from a Rose, because I guess Bob believed in it, and he said, "Listen to this song." And Joel called back, God rest his soul. He's passed on now. Joel called back the next day, and he said, "You know what? I temped the song in the scene, and it's just completely wrong. It doesn't fit. But I just love the song so much. I tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to stick the song on the end credits, right?" And actually, U2 had the song.
What was the song that they put on there for you two?
I can remember it in my head, but I can't remember what it was called. I can remember. Down, 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 down. It was an odd song. But anyway, Kiss from a Rose came after that on the end credits as the movie was ending. And so, 8 million albums and, 4 Grammys later, everyone's like, "Oh, we always knew." And by the way, the song didn't change. We didn't re-edit it. We didn't recut it. It was exactly the same song that went into the charts at 65, dropped to number 80 the next week, and was gone, dead. No one heard it, right? And there I was sitting on this song with these Grammys and these record sales, and all of a sudden this song became a household. I mean, I had the American military calling me up for permission, seriously, to play it in their dressage. For permission to play it. And there was a big lesson in that, because did the song change? No. The difference was that the last, however big the kind of the promotional machine of a record is, when it comes to a movie, it's massive. Like, millions are spent on that, like tens of millions are spent on the promotion. It's a promotional juggernaut. And the difference is that the last thing that people heard when they were leaving the theater was "Baby," and so it got, and also Joel made a video.
Right. And you're by the kind of the bat signal.
Yeah, by the bat signal. So and he made it. Actually, I've got to tell a little bit about the original video was made by a guy called Matthew Rolston, right? And it was terrible. It's a shocking video. It was kind of a pastiche of, God, it was like, it was a pastiche of David Hemmings in Blow Up, and I was this kind of sexy 60s studio photographer that was, photographing these models, and it was completely just like missed out. It was so wrong and so like corny. And that actually cost me like hundreds of thousands. Joel made a video, the video for Kiss from a
Yep.
Rose, where he cut in bits of the movie,
Yep.
right, and got me singing in front of the bat lights. He made it for like 40 grand. He didn't even take a fee. He said, like, I don't want a fee for it. I'm just going to do it for them because it's all good for the movie.
Yeah.
Made it for 40 grand. And because it had bits of the movie in it, and it was, you had the promotional juggernaut of, behind it. MTV didn't even like the song, but they had to play it.
Yeah.
They had to play the video. And then as soon as like it, the difference was that people actually, it's an odd song if you think about it. It's like, what is it? Is it R&B? Well, not really. It's got R&B elements, but it's kind of this weird Celtic melody in this 3/4, and there were no pop songs no pop hits with the 3/4 signature. It's a waltz. Like 1, 2, 3, 2. So MTV went into playing it, but eventually they had to, and then the difference was that people heard it come. That was the last thing they heard coming out of the movie theater, and it suddenly clicked. It was like, wow, that's a really good song. It's really unusual. I'm not quite sure what it is, but I really like it. And songs like that are not necessarily that immediate to begin with, but that are slow burners where they grow on you, they tend to have legs, and it had, till this day, it has incredible staying power. So I always think that's a really good lesson in when you're talking to young aspiring artists, is that you have to in the words of my dear old friend Bowie, you have to live dangerously. You have to constantly make yourself uncomfortable. You have to keep pushing. You have to, bless you. You have to, you don't play safe. You have to, there has to be passion and heart in it.
So what was the timeline gap between when Kiss from a Rose had fallen off the charts and then when Batman had released? Oof. Was that months? Was that years, or a year?
No, a few months.
Okay.
Few months. Not that long, no.
Interesting. Yeah. And the, I definitely remember the video and that whole thing. And it's kind of a crazy turn of events.
Kids thought I was Batman. Seriously.
Really?
Yeah, till this day. Well, they've grown up now, but I don't think they think so anymore. But I remember, kids used to come up to me and they used to think I was Batman.
I guess it's the music video. Yeah.
Everyone saw the video. They hadn't even seen the movie.
Yeah.
And they thought I was Batman.
Do you remember the first time you heard it on the radio?
No, I don't. I remember the first time I heard Kiss from a Rose, Pray for the Dying on the radio.
Uh-huh.
But Kiss from a Rose, no, I don't remember the first time I heard it on the radio. All I remember was that I couldn't stop hearing it on the radio.
Yeah.
Like it just, it even made me sick after a while, to be honest. I just couldn't get away from it. Thank God.